And greetings, happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Good to be back home, even though it was a great birthday getaway for the wife. Took her up to Mackinac Island to the Grand Hotel for the weekend. It's from her all-time favorite movie. So that was nice. It was a nice little getaway, but it is good to be back here. Good to see Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre again. Good to see all of you as well. Good to still be brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They are the Christian-owned Patriot Coffee Company that stands for the same fundamental values of faith, family, and freedom that you do as well. And they make some hella coffee. So if you want to get some great coffee, number one, and then number two, purchase it from people who don't hate you but have the same values that you do, number two, which I just said. You can do it right now at firstcup.com and use the promo code DACE for the discount. Freshness is their thing. They put the roast on date right there on every single bag so that you know for sure just how fresh it is when it gets to you. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. Again, firstcup.com with a promo code DACE. We have a lot to get to here today. We're going to try, we had some issues with this last week technically. We're going to try to reconnect with Robert Davi, who of course is one of the best faced, maybe a name you don't know, but the face you would absolutely recognize going back to the Goonies and so much more. I mean, one of the most prolific character actors of this era. And he plays Leonid Brezhnev, one of the Soviet premiers during the 80s, in the new Reagan film that opens up this Friday in theaters nationwide. So we're hoping to hook up with him next hour. Also, Bob Vander Plaats will join us at the bottom of this hour. But let's get it going, man. Aaron is absolutely locked and loaded, all right, with what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by this.
I don't think too many of you people have heard of him. He's very low-key. He's a very low-key person, but he's highly respected. He is a great person. I've known him for so long. For the past 16 months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
RFK Jr. has officially dropped his independent presidential candidacy and has thrown his support behind Donald Trump. RFK Jr. will be taking his name off the ballot in 10 critical swing states. In his announcement speech, he blasted the Democrat Party.
Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies. No interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus.
Kennedy is polling between 5 and 9% nationally, depending on where you look. On the same day RFK Jr. dropped out, Trump issued this statement from his Truth Social account, quote, "My administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights." Asked to clarify what he was talking about over the weekend.
I'm very strong on women's reproductive rights. The IVF, very strong. I mean, we're leaders in it. And I think people are seeing that, and votes are being taken, and that's what they've wanted for years. For 52 years, they've wanted votes to be taken by the states, and they wanted Roe v. Wade to be brought into the states. And it's really happening. It's really happening.
On Meet the Press over the weekend as well, VP hopeful J.D. Vance says no national ban on baby killing.
Can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen, and Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible.
The Kamala campaign is trying to change the agreed-upon rules for the upcoming debate scheduled for September 10th. Kamala says she doesn't want microphones muted during the debate, but that was reportedly one of the rules that had already been agreed upon. The fate of that debate is now unclear. California Governor Gavin Newsom is either mocking the Democrats or he's mocking us. Here he is on Pod Save America.
How are you feeling about the switch?
I mean, the switch. Now, we went through a very open process, and a very inclusive process. It was bottom up. I don't know if you know that. Yes, that's what I've been told to say.
Yes, it was a blitz primary, I believe is what they called it.
It's a very, very fast blitz. Yes. I think it was a blink primary, so we call that.
A 30-minute convention, between a tweet and another tweet.
It's amazing how it happened.
Yeah, it's been amazing. But what is amazing is how unified everybody is.
Senator Elizabeth Warren went on CNBC to talk about the economy and to deal with Kamala's claim grocers are price gouging consumers. It did not go well.
For 40 years, companies didn't know how to price gouge until 3.5 years ago when President Biden was elected. Where was the price gouging caught? We had 40-year highs in inflation. Where was the price? They just learned how to do this 3.5 years ago?
No, the difference is prices were not going up. And as I said, prices started going up for a whole host of reasons. Prices went up because of the pandemic. Prices went up because of supply chain kinks. Prices went up because of the war in Ukraine.
This is the third anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombing in Kabul, Afghanistan during the Biden-Harris administration's botched pullout attempt. That terror attack killed 13 U.S. service members. Joe Biden is on vacation. Kamala, who back then claimed she played a major role in the pullout, is missing in action. And Trump visited Arlington National Cemetery to pay his respects. Tim Wall's update. Here he is on 2 separate social media posts claiming to venerate his dog Scout, but it's 2 completely different dogs in each post. He's also facing another accusation of lying about his background after a resurfaced 2006 letter revealed the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce asked him to remove claims from his congressional campaign website that he'd won an award from that Chamber of Commerce. Moving on, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the face of the coronavirus meltdown, was hospitalized for 6 days with a case of West Nile virus. He's now recovering at home. A radical Islamist showed up to a diversity festival in Solingen, Germany, and you won't believe what happened next. 3 people were killed and 8 were wounded in a knife attack. The Islamic State claimed responsibility. A Syrian national who was in Germany on asylum claims turned himself in to authorities. Our Sacred Democracy update. A family in the Washington, D.C. area has lost custody of their 16-year-old autistic son after refusing to allow him to get meatball surgery and chemical castration. The family, a military family, is accusing Children's National Hospital of pressuring their impressionable son into so-called gender transition and has launched a lawsuit saying the hospital abused its emergency policies to keep the boy in its units and reported the parents to Child Protective Services. According to a new investigation here at The Blaze by Steve Baker, Capitol Police officers met the hoodie-wearing person suspected of planting a pipe bomb near the Republican National Committee office during the alleged bomb drop operation back in January 2021, but police did not detain or arrest the person. Despite apparently having the suspect next to 2 squad cars for nearly 3 minutes on January 5th, 2021, the officers did not detain or arrest the alleged bomber and allowed the person to go back to the crime scene and ostensibly finish the alleged bomb drop, previously undisclosed security video shows. Apparent police interactions with the bomber were never disclosed by Capitol Police or the FBI, which has failed to identify the suspect despite nearly 44 months of investigation and a $500,000 reward. You can read that full report over at The Blaze. And finally, this from the Babylon Bee. It was the Jews, screams Candace Owens on first round of the board game Clue. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you are one of the millions of Americans right now that is struggling with chronic pain, and that is usually because of too much inflammation in the body, you might be thinking, well, it's probably just I got old, and it is what it is. I mean, it might be. You know, we do get older and our bodies don't, get younger, Mr. Benjamin Button, the older we grow. Okay. There does come a point in time where we are just not what we used to be. There does come a point in time where these bodies just give out. The death rate remains 100%. But it may not yet be that time. You may have thrown in the towel a little too early. Why not just spend $20 to find out with our friends at Relief Factor? All right, it's the drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs. And this was created precisely because they didn't want to prescribe any more drugs that just mask the pain, but created something that went after what caused the pain in the first place. And that something is Relief Factor. All right. No guarantees, but over the years, over 1 million people have tried this. 70% of them saw such great results in the first 3 weeks. They stuck around with the product long term. So what do you got to lose for $20? Why don't you see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com, and that is relieffactor.com. All right, next segment with Bob Vander Plaats. I know he really wants to get into the ongoing whatever this is by the Trump campaign on the life issue. All right, so if you guys will forgive me, we're going to table that now, and we're going to discuss that with Mr. Vander Plaats when he joins us a little bit later on. I want to spend the rest of this time, if we could, and I hate to do this, man, because Aaron's montage, like I said, is absolutely locked and loaded. There's like 8 shows in that montage, okay? All right, that we could do. But I also think a lot of them are things that are symptomatic of the era in which we're in. Okay, there's one event in there that I think has the potential, maybe, to transcend the era in which we are in. And that is the endorsement of RFK Jr. of Donald Trump. Now, I say this believing also, because of the era in which we're in, that the nation watched a presidential candidate take a bullet to the face, and it's largely gone undiscussed for the last 3 or 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I say this because the country was put through nearly a month of whether or not Joe Biden can continue on. And now, you know, he has like nothing on his schedule like all day long today as president of the United States, nothing, okay? And like we've just all moved on. I mean, that is the era in which we are in. It is very possible. So let me state this as a disclaimer. It is very possible because of the era we are in. I mean, go back to what I just said about Aaron's montage. That's drinking through a fire hose right there. It is very possible because of the era that we are in that outside of a circle of people who were probably going to vote for Donald Trump anyway, this thing will largely be memory hold by this Friday. I want to make sure we state that. Okay. All right. So disclaimer given. Okay. That is very possible. But to me, let me do this. Let me go back several years ago. And I don't win a lot of arguments with Daniel Horowitz. So when he acknowledges that I won one, I'm going to own it. Okay. Because like me, Daniel is very hard to win an argument with. You have to win decisively for him to agree that you won. And I'm the same way. All right. So I remember when towards the tail end of Obama, and then really, especially with the advent of Trump, and even when we weren't supporting Trump at that period of time, we even noted, hey, there's something about this guy's campaign and personality where now the left just kind of feels like they can just openly come out and say and do the stuff that we were conjecturing and projecting and interpreting that they really meant with, behind the code language, right? Had a lot of those conversations in 2015, 2016, even early on in the Trump presidency, okay? And we saw the press go from bias to malfeasance, where it would just now openly print things that were just easily unproven or proven to be unfactual, right?
Yeah. Not
just factually accurate, but with their spin on it, but just absolute untruths, total lies, things that were verifiable. Remember, they kept claiming that the Trump tax cut was a tax increase. Remember, he was raising taxes. Remember this,
yes.
Okay? And I was like, well, guys, we're all gonna get our paychecks, and there's gonna be more in the net, or there's not, right? Okay, so. With that disclaimer stated, I remember saying to Daniel at this time, because he's like, if they continue on this path, they're never going to win a national election again. And I had the opposite take. I'm like, I'm actually concerned that, this is the way human nature and relationships work. Whenever you're involved in a duopolistic competition, or any kind of a binary arrangement, which is by and large what our elections are, unless you want to be a conscientious objector, and Lord knows I've been a conscientious objector more than once in my career. But by and large, these things become symbiotic, meaning that it's very hard for one side to act in a vacuum, in a static way that doesn't dynamically impact the other side, right? Think of a marriage, okay? If one of the spouses goes cray-cray, the idea that the other spouse will not be impacted by that in any meaningful way and will just continue on a deliberate equilibrium, and it won't impact their life at all. You're living with that every single day. I mean, it will have an impact, right? That's just the nature of how we are made, and we're relational beings by nature. Okay. And my fear is watching them go so far off to the left that the stuff we have talked about on this show for many, many years, that, yeah, it's still a right of center country, but they are moving the center further and further to the left. Okay. this election has now become, in many respects, a final verdict on what has become of the Democratic Party. And a few weeks ago, I started describing the election this way. It's 1990s New York City versus London, Minneapolis, and San Francisco 2024. New York City would be considered a liberal city by biblical standards. Christianity was certainly not ascendant, but it also wasn't targeted for extinction. It wasn't coercively infiltrated and targeted by the government. You could have a white law and order Republican mayoral candidate beat a black mayoral candidate, didn't cause race riots. It was a melting pot. It still symbolized enough of patriotic Americana that it was still a symbol to be targeted by evil on 9/11. We talked about this a few weeks ago.
Yes.
This endorsement confirms this analogy, in my view. The messaging that's coming out of this endorsement confirms this analogy. What we're really having here, and this has happened before. It happened in 1972 when you had George Wallace try to reignite the segregationist Democratic Party, and there was and essentially the election became a verdict on the future direction of the Democratic Party post-World War II. Would it be the segregationist party, or would it be a progressive party that George McGovern represented? And the progressives won. And they have been on that trajectory to some extent ever since. Bill Clinton realized we had to apply some brakes to this after several election losses in a row. Okay, but that's been their trajectory as a party ever since. A decisive verdict was rendered. Same thing happened in 1980. That was a verdict about the future of the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan had to beat a cadre of establishment candidates, governors, members of Congress from across the spectrum. And then he had to beat a Republican congressman who was trying to essentially Adam Kinzinger him, same state, Illinois. He was essentially trying to Adam Kinzinger him in the general, take enough away from him that Jimmy Carter could still win, because this was viewed as the right. This new right, particularly this moral majority, had taken over the Republican Party, and Reagan represented that. And we want to go back. We want to go back to what the waspy party the Republicans were before, and a verdict was rendered there. Okay, about the generational direction of that party. Now, the trajectory has not been as consistently right within the Republican Party since that verdict as it was consistently left since 1972 in the Democratic Party. But at the very least, the right flank has had agency and has been has had legitimate influence on the American politics more than ever before since that election. It has not always been the dominant faction within the Republican Party, but it has been a significant one. Are you guys still with me so far?
Yeah.
What's being decided right now in this election right now is, and this is going to be, I think, difficult for many people on the right to navigate. But what this has really turned into is a referendum on the direction of the Democratic Party. And everything I've talked about for years, that the Republican Party is not a big tent, but a big tarp. This is all happening and coming to fruition right now. There are many people coming together here in opposition to what the Democratic Party has become that really don't have a lot of other things in common. Like I would imagine, for example, Brett Weinstein has bristled at many of Donald Trump's immigration comments for the last 10 years. But he is now supporting the Trump-Kennedy, and they're calling it the unity ticket, so I don't know what that means for J.D. Vance. I mean, this is kind of a monot. Well, I shouldn't put it that way. I guess we'll...
It's impossible.
Yeah, it's you know what it is in many respects? Is it's actually a metaphor. The Vance-Kennedy-Trump dynamic is a metaphor for this election, actually. Vance represents the ideological right, which in and of itself has a lot of diversity, okay? He's now just a faction in the party. Kennedy represents whatever percentage is left of old liberals, actual civil libertarians, the kinds of people James Woods was when you and I were growing up in the 70s and 80s, right? And now he's looked at like he's some kind of based right-winger just because he's not a communist, right? Okay. That's who RFK Jr. represents. And then Trump largely just represents people of various ideological persuasions who have lost faith overall in the system, to the point that almost to the point of being sometimes ineffective, because if you're like, well, here's what we can do within the system, they immediately become distrusting of it, even if you're in control of it. On the other side is China, the World Economic Forum, Soros. Let's arrest the Telegram guy. That's essentially what the other side is. And what we're going to get right now is a referendum on, and it's not just going to be because of the symbiotic nature. This is key. It's not just going to be a referendum. Here's the, and this just came to me, so I'm workshopping it right now in real time. But stick with me, because this didn't dawn on me until I just started talking, and it clicked to me. Hey, I've got to actually be consistent with my own analogy. If I'm going to say because of symbiosis, these things are relational, that also won't happen in a vacuum. We're not just going to get a referendum on whether an openly, at least neo-Marxist political party in America, economically, culturally, every way you could imagine, at least neo-Marxist, if not flat out Soviet, at least neo-Marxist. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get a referendum on whether the American people are willing to accept that. But because of the symbiotic nature, just as the Democrats going crazy drove the Republicans further to the left just at a slower pace, this will work the other way too. What we're also going to get a referendum on is whether or not you are capable of crafting a message that is achievable to take this other wide variance of beliefs and put them together in some kind of a goulash coalition. Because if you can't, what is likely to happen after this election is some form of not just Trump de facto representing a third party within the Republican Party, not just RFK, the populist left and the populist right coming together as a de facto third party operating under the GOP label, but if they can't, if they cannot craft a message, and that also plays into why this life stuff is so important. Because for many people, particularly Christians, it's been the number one cause for why they've even gotten involved in elections in the first place. And so if we're resetting the board here and it's late August, early September, and voting starts in 2 weeks, there's a Herculean task on the other side, which is, can you put all these various groups of people into a messageable and achievable coalition, despite fundamental differences of matters that are significant? Are the significant differences that they have with the other side? At best, if you look at human nature, this is not, I can promise you this won't be a long-term coalition. At best, what's happening with Trump and RFK Jr. and essentially crushing the religious right and the old pro-life social conservative right, at best, you're going to get enough of those people to go along with you because of what the other side represents, that this is the American political equivalent of FDR and Churchill at Yalta with Stalin. But that's not going to work long term. You're going to maybe do this one time. The idea that this for the next 20 years, Christians are just going to sit there and say, I guess we're just going to be okay with no restrictions on child sacrifice. I promise you that will not happen. That will not occur. You're already seeing Christian leaders who in the past have covered for every form of GOP retardation are speaking out openly against this now. So the idea that for the next 20 years, A new generation of people are going to rise and say, we're totally down with it. That's not going to happen. Just like there wasn't going to be a long-term alliance between Joseph Stalin, FDR, and Winston Churchill. It wasn't going to be a long-term alliance. And so what will happen in this election, I believe, is now that RFK Jr. is on board officially with Trump, I know I said last week I can't even envision what life would be like if we lost, but seeing what's happening now, I think it's a little bit more clear than I thought it was a week ago of what will happen here. Either there will be a rejection of what the Democrats have become. There is a temporary moment where people of various persuasions agree this is an untenable future for society and has to be rejected soundly. That will occur. Or B, it won't. Because you could not craft the message that kept this goulash of belief systems intact. Or C, it will work this time. But moving forward, once you actually try to govern, and you just cannot keep enough people together to actually govern on this, there's too many differences, it'll break off. Or D, it won't work, and then people will be like, that coalition doesn't work, and it'll break off. But to me, I think we're now in one of those four arenas. It is very clear, basically take Mike Pence and the traditional religion, and we can discuss this morally until we're blue in the face. I'm just looking at this from a political science standpoint analytically. Basically take Mike Pence as your VP and the traditional vote Republican for constrictionist judges, mobilize the Christian right playbook for a generation. Trump used that successfully in 2016. Substitute that for what RFK Jr. represents. And then Trump in his campaign is just assuming that they will still enough of that old Christian right will vote for them, even while their leaders are openly grumbling. Because this is the addition, this is the multiplication of the coalition they need to overcome the other side. That's very clear now. Now that the board is set, the pieces are in motion. This is the chessboard now the rest of this way, barring something, which will likely happen given this cycle, organic we cannot right now foresee. A nuclear bomb in Ukraine, escalation with Iran in the Middle East, something organic. Those are the chess pieces now that everybody has assembled here. The Democrats are not moderating. They're not expanding. They are going to openly run as a neo-Marxist party, believe they have enough control, power, coercion over the system. They have the narrative in place now without a senile candidate that they can do this. Let me stop there because this could be a 3-hour show, what I'm laying out right here. You guys each have 30 seconds to give your thoughts. Okay?
You're boiling it down for me. I think ultimately this is the people are the problem. Because the ones who are aware, which is an increasingly small number, are wide open to all manner of nonsense. And then the people who aren't really aware are like engaging on old irrelevant paradigms. So it's like the person that goes to a high stakes poker table and they don't know what the hell they're doing. And there's a certain etiquette that goes on. It blows up the entire thing. I don't think we're in trouble. We're in big trouble, and there's nothing. The odds are high that all outcomes are bad.
Yeah, the impact of the Kennedy endorsement didn't really. I heard the news. We were kind of expecting this on Friday. Saw it. It was like, okay, yep, this is unquestionably, I think, a good thing for Donald Trump. We just don't know how good. It didn't really hit me what the impact or what the meta-analysis or meta-impacts of this could be until I saw that New York Post headline saying, just when you thought that you'd seen it all, a Kennedy endorses a Republican. But the question is, how much there is there when it comes to the American people along the lines of what Todd was saying? It is a time for choosing, but I'm not sure if we have the eyes to see. That's going to be one of the clarifying things about November.
We're going to come back and revisit this topic in the final segment of the show, all right? Because there's another angle to this as well. Stay tuned. right, back here on the Steve Day Show, powered by our friends over at Hillsdale College. As the kids are heading back to school, we want to tell you about a really cool learning opportunity from Hillsdale. I know you guys are amongst already one of the most informed audiences out there, but you can still grow, and our friends at Hillsdale want to help you do that. Make sure to check out the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You can listen to one of their excellent podcasts while taking a walk, driving to work, including Larry Arnn, the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Online Courses podcast. They're all top-notch. You can find them on all major podcast platforms as well. That's why they've got millions of downloads. They'll be your new, we hope anyway, second favorite podcast with our friends over at Hillsdale who are defending liberty on the battlefield of education. Find your new second favorite, we hope, podcast today at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. At daceforhillsdale.com is where you can go. FOR, daceforhillsdale.com. Again, that's daceforhillsdale.com. And there is a lot happening in the country right now. Good to see our good friend Bob Vander Plaats. Brother, how are you?
I'm very blessed. Good to be here.
So let's start. You got three things that you wanted to address with our audience this week. Let's start with the conclusion of the DNC and the formal unveiling of Kamala Harris who has won as many Democratic primaries as you and I have. She has won as many Democratic delegates as you and I have, and right now she's at least a coin flip to be the next president of the United States.
And Steve, that's why I watched the DNC convention, and in particular wanted to pay attention to Kamala Harris and her speech, because I remember her in the Iowa caucuses. She caught fire early. A lot of people thought, she could be the next Barack Obama. And then she flamed out early, too. And all of a sudden, she doesn't make the Iowa caucuses. And you're right, we have as many primary electoral votes as she has. But I wanted to see how this got played out. I watched the DNC convention with CNN being my commentary, so to see what are they saying and what are they thinking. And I've got to tell you, as a basketball coach, I'd always tell my team, respect the opponent. That doesn't mean you need to like them, but respect the opponent. Before you get into stick with the fundamentals, focus on the game plan, believe you can win, but you got to respect the opponent. And I've got to tell you, it's game on right now. And for us who are supporting Trump or those who are supporting the Republican Party and the candidates, the House, the Senate, it is game on. These guys are unified. There's a lot of energy. When I watch Kamala Harris give her 43-minute address, in my mind, I was saying they're going to play this like this is the best speech given since Barack Obama 08. Mm-hmm. And barely after I thought that, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash were saying this is the best speech since Barack Obama 08. It was almost like I got chills up my spine. Again, right. And, the guy that precedes you on the Blaze show, Glenn Beck, was like, I think I'd be worried right now after that speech. And so I think the worldviews, as we talked about here, it could not be as big of a contrast as possible. I think it could be bigger, but it is a huge contrast in worldview today. But boy, they are polishing up something. I'm not sure America knows what they're going to get when they vote for that. But I'd be very concerned right now, as I know they all are, as they just talked about, all hands on deck with Trump right now.
Well, she can execute their talking points. Joe Biden could not do that from the start. I mean, they just needed Joe Biden at some point in the first 15 minutes to call Donald Trump an insurrectionist and convicted felon with some certainty so they could turn that into a 30-second ad and run that on repeat. And he couldn't do that. In fact, it was like an hour. I remember I marked the time following the debate. It was like 45 minutes, an hour into the debate before Joe Biden even could get to the basic Democrat talking point. So she can at least execute the game plan, and then their ability to craft narratives with all of the cultural resources they bring to bear take over from there, which is why there has to be a debate. The odds we will lose to her if there's not a debate go up significantly. So I don't know what that number is, but whatever number you think it is right now, they go up significantly because it's probably our only opportunity to get her at least somewhat off of script is in that segment.
And you do not want her just to have one debate. You want her to have 2 debates, 3 debates, as many debates as you can have with her have. Hopefully they give at least Trump 3 chances here, but they need to at least have the September 10 debate. I agree with you.
So that's where things are at on the opponent's side. The life issue, we talked a ton about this on this show all of last week, and the risk of leaving a certain percentage of these voters at home that you will need later on. Okay. And I think now with the endorsement of RFK Jr., who I like on several levels, but also vehemently disagree with on several others, but we also only vetted 3 candidates on this show last year that we thought were worthy of a vote: Trump, DeSantis, and RFK Jr. Well, they're now all aligned together in this election, which is fascinating. Okay. It is very clear that some form of replacement theory is happening within the Republican Party, that they still believe that they can get 75% of evangelicals without us, or without, certain amount of pro-life leaders who are grumbling publicly right now after years of trying to be me trying to essentially get them to, and then they just took it. And now suddenly, when the guy overturned Roe is doing it, John McCain and Mitt Romney, they just took it from him. Now suddenly they want to have this fight in the middle of the election. But here we are. Okay. It's very clear that they believe they'll still get just 70 or 75% of those people without caring what Lila Rose or Ralph Reed or Tony Perkins think. And then you're going to be replaced basically by the 4 to 5% of the electorate that of points they think RFK is going to bring them in these battleground states. That is his share of the electorate that he was taking from them. That's clearly the plan, and those numbers will work out so that they can just try to avoid talking about this issue altogether because they think it's toxic. And you see this both in the comments from the presidential nominee and the VP nominee over the weekend. Watch this.
You to post about women's reproductive rights this morning. Has your stance on abortion changed?
No, very good. I'm very strong on women's reproductive rights. The IVF, very strong. I mean, we're leaders in it. And I think people are seeing that, and votes are being taken, and that's what they've wanted for years. For 52 years, they've wanted votes to be taken by the states, and they wanted Roe v. Wade to be brought into the states. And it's really happening. It's really happening.
Democrats made the case this week and beyond this week that Donald Trump, if elected, will impose a federal ban on abortion if he wins. Now, Donald Trump says he won't, but can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen, and Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible. I think it's important to step back and say, what has Donald Trump actually said on the abortion question, and how is it different from what Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said? Donald Trump wants to end this culture war over this particular topic. If California wants to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, then Ohio has to respect California, and California has to respect Ohio.
Okay. What do you think?
Well, this is concerning. It's because when I take a look at the DNC convention, what that was, I mean, we talked about it last week, having trailers outside to perform abortions for 2 days, to do vasectomies for a whole day. It was all about rallying their base. When you watch Kamala Harris and her speech, it was rallying the base, making the border issue her issue and placing the border failure on Donald Trump. You just saw it, the game plan being almost played out. I'm energizing my base and I'm trying to reach out to those independents. When you see the former president, and I'm thrilled that he overturned or appointed the justices that led to the overturn of Roe v. Wade, but now coming out and doubling down, I'll be the best president ever for women's reproductive rights. That just squashes the enthusiasm of the base. And then J.D. Vance, who's a very effective spokesperson for the former president, basically saying he will not, or he will veto any, ban on abortion whatsoever, that President Trump will veto any of that. Again, you tamping that down. And this is going to be a base turnout election. That little sliver in the middle, that is a small sliver that you're trying to win over. Who's going to have the enthusiasm for that base? And so what I'm saying is that why not just come out and say, I will be a president who always stands for the culture of life. You don't have to go deeper than that. But America's always been about a culture of life. We've been advising that. But right now, Steve, you talk about your phone blowing up a lot. My phone blew up over the weekend on our national signal thread about what do we do with this? Because they see the same numbers you just pointed out. We can win without them. And there's some leaders now going, well, let them win without us. And I'm like, there is so much at stake. I
think there's going to need to be, first of all, Trump has never committed to any long-term message. Just acknowledge that.
Yep.
Okay. But number two, I think there's going to need to be data that shows that the theory that RFK's base will replace the disgruntled pro-lifers is what will be required, barring an act of God, for him to articulate the message that you just said between now and the election. I think there clearly is a replacement theory occurring here, that whatever few points of these people that that we're not going to get, we'll just replace them with RFK's voters.
But in this close of an election, I agree with that. The RFK voters. Matter of fact, I reached out to Frank Luntz, who happens to be a friend of mine. I know we don't always agree with Frank. But I asked Frank.
I often do not, just for the record. But go ahead.
I said, what percentage does RFK bring to the table? And he said 1 to maybe 2. But if 1 to maybe 2 in this tight of an election, that's a crucial 1 to 2. Well, if the pro-life community brings 3 to 5, that's a crucial 3 to 5 as well. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you can't have them cancel each other out. And so my thing is, yes, you need to weigh the RFK voter, but why not double down on being the president who stood for the culture of life, appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, led the overturn of Roe v. Wade? Yes, it gets decided in the states, but it's also the people's elected representatives, which means the federal government still has a role in the abortion debate.
I think that with the RFK thing and the way it's been messaged, and I mentioned this before you came on, but I think this confirms the analogy I laid out here a few weeks ago, that this election is 1990s New York City versus 2024 San Francisco, Minneapolis, and London. That's essentially what we're going to have an election about, okay? A city that's liberal by American standards, but is still, or by biblical standards, but is still pro-America. Christianity is not targeted for extinction, but it's not a dominant belief system in the community either, okay? But are we going to roll the clock back to 1997? And I would argue that America, by almost any standard, was superior in 1997 to what it is now, okay? But I think, but that's essentially what the election now is. Do you want to roll the clock back to 1997? Okay, or not? That's essentially what the election is now.
And that's why when I took a look at your tweet, Steve, and so that's my third one. Number 1 being Kamala and the DNC convention. Number 2 being Trump and J.D. Vance and the whole reproductive rights argument in this election.
Real quick, is it possible that we're dealing with Trump? He doesn't mind lying.
Sure.
Is it possible dude's just lying about all this, and then we'll just do whatever the hell he wants if he gets elected?
Yes, but he will, because I've always said he's a transactional leader.
Correct.
If the pro-life community delivers for him, he will deliver for the pro-life community as president. Because you do well by me, I do well by you. If you don't show up for me, I won't show up for you. That's always been the way he is. And that's why when you brought the tweet there about New York City, I thought, of course you'd like to go back to New York City during that time. At least you had law and order. You could raise a family. You could visit. You could take in a Broadway show. You didn't have to agree with all the values, but at least New York City was a good place to visit or to live at that point. That's the same way I see this with Trump. I know, and you said this in your tweet, if Kamala Harris is elected, if Harris and Walz are elected, she will allow for abortion up to the time of birth, maybe after birth, in any pregnancy for whatever reason, and the taxpayers pay for it, and the parents don't have to give consent for it. We can do that. I can take your kids away if you don't believe in the gender-affirming care that they seek. I know she'll do that. So therefore, the President Trump, I believe he has shown that, you know what, I will work with you on your issue if you show you can deliver for me. And that's why I think that's a very big issue, especially when I see all the euphoria happening in Chicago this past week. And the big reason they're so excited, if we're just transparent, is because Biden's not at the top of the ticket. Now they believe they have a shot to defeat Trump. It's not even really about Kamala right now. It's about we think we have a shot to defeat Trump. And I think we need to take a look at it. Your base, your audience, my base, we have to look at the long view here. And I'm telling you what, I do not want to risk a Kamala Harris and Governor Walz presidency and say, you know what, but at least I sent Trump a message. That would be a risky bet, in my opinion.
All right, Todd and Aaron, what are your thoughts here? We got about 3 minutes. Aaron, I'll let you go first this time.
I want to preface this, and I'm going to be really careful to make sure I preface this, that this is not an endorsement, nor is this anything resembling giving Donald Trump a free pass. Morally, what they are doing on that ticket, I believe, is at very best political malpractice. It is, of course, a very immoral position that they are embracing right now when it comes to the issue of baby killing. However, after the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and you look around the many great successes that the pro-life movement has had around the country.
Exactly.
Yep.
and you got to be doing the political calculation in your head.
If you're a craven man like Donald Trump, that's what you're doing.
What do you give me?
Yep.
What are you giving me?
What do you bring to the table I don't already have?
I'm not endorsing this. I want to make that clear. And for some of you, that's probably not even going to be good enough.
Yep.
But basically, I'm trying as best as I can. And just looking at this from the outside in, getting into the mind, the political machinations over there. And I have to think on some level, that's what they're seeing. Even though that's not necessarily true, and you've gone through the data, you've done that many, many times, I just have to think that's kind of the calculus that's going on.
I agree. Now, we have a new calculus, though, Aaron, and that is an open, disaffected Democrat with a big name openly representing 2, 3, 4 points of the electorate and campaigning with that for Trump. You see what I'm saying? That does change. It may not change the math. We all might be sitting here November 6th again saying you shouldn't have done that to your own base. But it's possible that it might change the math.
Without question.
I don't know that it doesn't. Todd, what do you think?
I just wish Trump was better at the thing he says he's really good at, the art of the deal. The game is simple. They know that the left knows they're the weird ones. So right out of the gate, you guys have to be weird, and we got the apparatus. We're going to use the press. So here is there some big Republican thing happening where we're really going to vote for this national ban on abortion? I want it to happen. You want it. Is that about to happen?
No.
Why are you accepting the premise of it then? Because it's not even close to happening. Mm-hmm. You say, you know what? I may want be pro-life, but you're acting like this is going to happen tomorrow. It's not. I know what happened yesterday. You're having a food truck of abortions. You're the weird ones. Mm-hmm. He's just bad at the art of the deal. We're making this too complicated. We're talking about which votes here and which votes here. Just don't suck at this.
well said with some passion.
That is a great point. Why you guys had a mobile truck in front of your convention doing abortions?
And that terrible journalist is sitting there backing us into a corner?
Yeah.
Like, what? We're going to ban abortions? I would love to do it. It's not going to happen. We've never been close to making this happen. And the Republicans, really, you give them, they had every branch when Trump started. Didn't come close to doing this. This isn't happening.
You know,
how many dollars of Democrat ads attacking Trump for being against reproductive health do you think have been canceled because Trump says he's pro-women's reproductive?
Zero.
You sure about that? They didn't cancel other ads and say, crap, well, he got us. He got us, guys.
And the other thing is, how many voters is it really moving? So I agree with Aaron. I agree with Todd. Make this their issue. You're out of step with American mainstream. We're in step with American mainstream. You're right, Todd. It's not that hard. Choose well.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Hour 2 is next. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by our friends over at My Patriot Supply. Get their mega 3-month emergency food kit, jam-packed with 33 varieties of filling and delicious foods. That's breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks, so that, well, that could never happen here. When that happens here next, you are fully and completely prepared. This includes vegetables and fruits, all in this emergency food kit that provides a whopping 2,500 calories per day to keep you well-fed and prepared for anything, and it stays good for up to 25 years as well. Go to preparewithdace.com right now. Save $300 on your mega 3-month emergency food kit. It ships fast and free. That's preparewithdace.com to save $300 on your 3-month emergency food kit right now at preparewithdace.com. You can also let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Steve at stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, that's X nowadays, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can also, if you wouldn't mind, leave us a 5-star review if you like the show. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review there. Thank you to all of you that have done that. You can also, if you wouldn't mind doing this as well, hit subscribe or follow. If you're on iTunes, you hit follow these days, and that'll make sure every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. Well, apparently the spirit of the age just does not want us to promote the Reagan movie. We tried again. We could not get it to work. So just here's what I'm going to do. I feel bad for him, man, because I've been in their shoes with a movie the enemy doesn't want you to see. And one of the producers over there, John Sullivan, is also one of my producers on Nefarious and a great guy. Just give him a free plug. Go see the movie this weekend.
Reagan.movie in theaters on Friday.
Reagan.movie. Dennis Quaid is a great actor. All right. And it's a phenomenal story. And it's one the country desperately needs right now, which is exactly why the hacks at Facebook don't want to let the movie get promoted. All right. So make sure to go see it this weekend. Let's have that be the dominant film coming out. Wouldn't that be something if Deadpool and Wolverine gets replaced atop the box office by the Reagan movie? All right. Coming out of Labor Day. That is Reagan.film, correct, Aaron?
Reagan.movie.
Reagan.movie. Thank you. Reagan.movie is where you can go get tickets. You can see the trailer, etc. A lot of named actors that you would recognize are in this film. So looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to go see it this weekend for sure. All right. So Reagan.movie is where you want to go. Reagan.movie is where you want to go. And I am also just going to, you know me, I like to declare victory in every situation. So I am just going to spin this as we are meant to unpack what I laid out in the opening segment a little more. Because if I'm right, we are living through right now, regardless of how important you may think the outcome of this election is, and I happen to think it's very important, but meaningfully what it will mean for the future political landscape could be extraordinary. Now, I'm going to do this. Today's my last day. I'm moving on. You guys want to send me notes individually? I'll try to respond to them as many as I can, but I'm done on X dealing with conservatives that don't want to vote for Trump. I've tried to entertain them for several weeks. He actually has given you if you want a reason, it's the fact he's running the most pro-choice campaign in the history of the Republican Party. But much of your reasoning is just so bad, I'm moving on. And my last straw is there does seem to be that most of these people, frankly, are just live in Florida, at least on Twitter. When you click on their bios, almost all of them live in Florida and have like a DeSantis header. And I love Governor Ron DeSantis. I think he'd have been a better candidate to run this time. I mean, imagine if we had run the younger candidate this time, so that now they're on the defensive and we're the ones that represent the new generation. I mean, I just think things would be dramatically different right now if he was the nominee.
We did imagine. We imagined really, really hard.
At great risk, in fact. But I can't take seriously anymore as we head into September. I've got glowing comments on Ron DeSantis in my bio and my header. Okay, but if anyone else other than Ron DeSantis is supporting Trump, they're a sellout or hack or phony. I'm moving on. You're just not a serious person to me. You're just not. But you won't even consistently apply your own standard before you even ask other people to go along with it. So after today and this morning, I'm just not addressing this at all anymore the rest of this election. I'll give you my thoughts on what I think Trump is saying or doing at the time and how I think it impacted my vote or the election. But in terms of trying to engage any more of these people, it's not a worthwhile exercise. It's a waste of energy. If you can't even hold your own beloved governor to the stand, he's raising tens of millions of dollars for Donald Trump. He spoke prime time at his convention, and somehow you're asking a talk show host with an upper middle class level audience in terms of size. Okay, somehow I'm to be held to a higher standard than your own governor. I'm just not playing that game. You're just not serious, and I'm just moving on. So I'm done.
Yeah, and there's another hypocrisy about standards. I mean, you just saw how frustrated I am with the man. I get it. And if you don't want to vote for him, fine. But people also lecturing us, it's not just the people in Florida, in a red state, but conservatives living perpetually in blue states lecturing us about principles. You make a compromise every day if you're a so-called conservative living in New York or California. Now suddenly you make no compromises in your life?
You're out there going to work every day, subsidizing all of this every day, and you seem to be totally fine with it. So why are you lecturing the people in the half dozen states that are going to decide this thing and don't have a governor like a Ron DeSantis, or at least for another 2 years to protect them? Why they might think it's a pretty bad idea for an openly neo-Marxist party with a VP nominee with Jenny Hastert vibes, okay, and a complete slutty nitwit for a nominee who can't win a damn primary in her own party and might be the next president of the United States, which means the exact same unforeseen forces that have been running the country for the last 3 years with a dementia patient in charge charge are going to run him again, okay, and run him and now accelerate this for another 4 years. But you're right. You're sitting there in the blue state where your vote doesn't count, subsidizing all forms of evil. You've got thoughts. That's great. Thank you for that. The rest of us will be over here fighting the battle. I'm just going to move on. I'm not doing this anymore. There's nothing productive there, period. So from now on, it's just going to be mute. You guys are just all wasting your time, all right? So let's have a productive conversation, because I do think there are moral qualifications here that need to be weighed and discussed and thought about, okay? And to quote Admiral Kirk on the bridge of the Enterprise right after his first sneak attack from Khan, this is damned peculiar. Okay? I don't know how to do this math. I'm just telling you. Flat out, man. I'm a man of certainty, and if I'm not certain about something, I won't comment on it. That doesn't mean I'm certainly right every time I think I'm certain. That's certainly not true. Okay? But if I'm not certain, I'm out. I'm either out or all the way in. I'm just going to listen. That's why you have a tendency to see me comment on a similar menu of things. Those are the things I'm certain on. What I'm not certain about, in fact, I asked this for my theology, a variation of this for my theology question on all my social medias today. What I'm not certain about is I understand completely being absolutely repulsed, if you're a pro-lifer, by the messaging of the Trump campaign. If you are not at least uncomfortable with it, I would probably ask what kind of a pro-lifer you are. Frankly. I mean, a year ago, J.D. Vance was in favor of not turning every mailbox in America into a potential abortion clinic with telemed, abortion drugs. Now the Trump campaign is totally fine with putting an abortion in every mailbox in America, basically. I don't know how you wouldn't be like it if you're any kind of pro-lifer at all. I don't know how you wouldn't be like, that's at least got to get a what you talking about, Willis. Look, you would think, okay, at least if we're serious about this. But here's what's damn picky. See, Steve, this is what I'm trying to say. This is where it's not quite that simple. Because a lot of the people that are the most upset about this, like the Tony Perkins and those kinds of pro-life leaders, they were totally fine with John McCain and Mitt Romney. Tony Perkins tried to stop me from telling people the truth that Mitt Romney funded taxpayer-funded abortions with Romney Care. Him and I argued about that vehemently back in the 2012 and 2008 elections. See what I'm saying? This isn't cut and dried. Because what we used to get all the talking points we wanted. And we just kind of ignored when they said they were pro-life with exceptions, right? We just ignored that part, okay? Which, by the way, if you're pro-life with exceptions, a lot of times, unless you put real legal teeth behind it, like what they've tried to do in Florida and Iowa and some other states, essentially, and Lila Rose proved this 15 years ago, any young woman could walk into any abortion clinic, claim she was raped, and get an abortion right away, even if it's not true. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of that's a canard, frankly, okay? But for years, many of these pro-life leaders were totally fine with Republicans giving us the talking points that we wanted, without delivering any results. In his entire political career, what has Mitt Romney done pro-life? Nothing is the answer. Nothing. Been in the Senate? Nothing. Nothing. In his entire political career, what did John McCain do? Nothing. Nothing. In fact, the one time that Bush was going to mobilize just judges that might have actually given us what we wanted, he organized the gang to oppose that. What did George W. Bush do? he banned experimentation on one line of embryonic stem cells. Well, Steve, he banned late-term abortion. No, he didn't ban late-term abortion. No, he didn't. That's why we're still arguing about it right now. One method of it was banned in Carhart versus Gonzalez, but the procedure in and of itself wasn't banned. So we actually didn't stop any abortions with that. That was supposedly the biggest pro-life victory we had prior to Trump, and it didn't stop a single abortion. I mean, in all reality, prior to the Trump era, which is when the heartbeat bills and everything else started, what did these pro-life political leaders produce? You guys, Aaron, you grew up listening to me do this show. Todd, you used to tune into me doing this show, bringing these leaders on. Question: what have you guys done? Nothing. They've done did nothing. Nothing. Prior to Trump, these people accomplished nothing. They held a march in January. That's all they did. And they hated me for telling them that, which is why I'm probably the biggest pro-life show in America that's never been invited to that thing. Because it's true. They accomplished nothing. Nothing. Without Donald Trump, these leaders have accomplished squat. That's true. Further complicated, so they have no political clout at all. For years and years, they covered for Republicans who had no record and no intention of doing anything, but just gave us all the rub your belly talking points we all wanted, so we could feel sanctimoniously better than the other side. Well, now we've got a guy who did far more than any of the rest of these people have ever done. And now he's given us the absolute most defeatist, worst messaging on this we've ever seen. I don't know how to do that math. This is beyond me. I don't know. I really don't. I can't even begin to tell. Dude, I'm sitting out there on the porch at the Grand Hotel doing this math in my head. I'm thinking about this like constantly. I cannot figure it out. I can't give you the Steve Day certainty on this. I don't know the answer to this. I don't. And the only certainty I keep coming back to is, did you guys see the story in Aaron's montage? Hey, we found a guy dropping off bombs over by the RNC. We just let him go. So a month ago, we let the math club guy scale a wall like Spider-Man in front of the entire Secret Service to get a turkey shot at your candidate. A month later, guys just randomly dropping off pipe bombs in front of your headquarters. That's the only thing I'm certain about. I am certain of their certainty. That's what I am certain about. I am certain that they want to end my way of life. I am 100% of it. And every time I do this math, I keep coming back to that conclusion. I am certain of this. They have made it very clear. And you know, to my Catholic friend, are the fruits not there demonstrating their intentions here?
They are.
They are. That's where I'm certain. I don't know if Donald Trump will have 3 different abortion positions between now and November 5th. I don't know. I don't know that Donald Trump is not just full Rahab, just flat out lying. I don't see any Bothan spies, Canaanite spies. I don't even know what a Canaanite is. What's a Jew? Never heard of him. Entirely possible. Entirely possible that he's just cravenly, as Aaron pointed out, done the math and realized he's got more pull with pro-life voters than their own leaders do, and he can get those voters to support him more than they'll support them, and then he'll just supplement the people that are bitching and moaning with RFK voters. Any of those things are possible. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me to just openly message to have a portion of your own base not vote for you. Doesn't make sense to me. But I also now have to assume, you know, I've been harping on this for the last 2 weeks. I have to assume the whole RFK Jr. endorsing me thing didn't happen in 48 hours. Fair? So chances maybe this has been going on for weeks. They've been plotting this out because and it's probably just not a random coincidence that this came down the Friday after the Democratic convention either. Fair?
Right.
And so maybe the plan has been in place all along. We are going to run a race on how radically left the Democrats are, and to prove that case, here is the last scion of the great Democrat patriarchal family, the Kennedys, to endorse me and actively go out there on my behalf. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, after all, that's why I suggested they should make Tulsi Gabbard the nominee for VP to make this case, right? Okay. It's entirely possible this is a coordinated strategy. I don't know. I'm not, and I know some people on the inside. They all have different answers. I don't know. We're dealing with a craven man and who's very random. I don't know. Here are the things that I know. Here are the things that I know. I am certain about who these people are. I am certain about what they will do to people like me and you if given the opportunity. Of that, I am certain. And I'm also certain that they have gone after him despite all the ways he frustrates me, currently included. I've also seen, dude, how many shots has Ralph Reed taken in the last 30 years? He's been running he took over the Christian Coalition for Pat Robertson. How many shots have they taken at him? At least Tony Perkins, they once tried to shoot his place up. I'll give him credit for that. But a lot of these pro-life leaders that are grumbling right now, how many of them have taken a bullet from the spirit of the age? See what I'm saying? They're shooting at him. They're not shooting at you. You know what I'm saying? You're not a threat. You're not a threat.
And if you were, we would have never gotten to Trump in the first place.
This whole idea. Let me read this to you. This is. I saw this morning in my feed. And I don't know the account, but I chose to respond because this guy has over 25,000 followers. Just realize the GOP of family values, fiscal conservatism, peace through strength, free market capitalism, adherence to the Constitution, law and order, and personal responsibility doesn't exist anymore. Not just hype, it's a completely different party now, dead and gone. When did this party exist? Stephen Schmidt, who you guys have seen for the last 5 years on MSNBC, crushing Republicans. Do you guys know who he is? That was John McCain's national campaign manager. He basically invented the log cabin Republicans. During the 2008 presidential election, he went and gave them a speech and said, when John McCain gets elected, your time for marriage equality is going to come. Now, if you were listening to WHO radio from 4 to 7 p.m. in the afternoons in 2008, you knew that because I told you. But if you weren't, which most of you weren't, guess what? You probably just now heard this because Tony Perkins didn't tell you and Ralph Reed didn't tell you. And now all of a sudden, when the other side's got a freaking bazooka pointed at our faces and an itchy trigger finger, now all of a sudden they want to tell you the truth. Forgive me, guys. I'm not buying any of this. As frustrated as I am with Donald Trump on a daily basis, I would get in a foxhole with Donald Trump 17 times before I got in one with Tony Perkins and Ralph Reed and that crew once. I don't know where Trump will fire. It might even hit me, but I know the trigger will at least be tapped. We won't walk out of there with a bunch of full shells. These are the people that presided over losing a culture for 30 years and hated people like me for telling you stuff like that about John McCain. How many of you heard when National Review, who's writing articles about Trump betraying his pro-life base? Weird, because I remember when National Review put Mitt Romney on the cover, the next Reagan, while he was signing off on taxpayer-funded abortions with Romneycare, while he was shutting down Todd's Catholic Charities in Massachusetts because they didn't want to do homo adoptions. How many of you heard that? Now, if you listen to WHO radio from 4 to 7 p.m. in the afternoons in 2006 and 2007, 2008, you knew this. And that's why Mitt Romney didn't win our state in either caucus. But if you were tuned in to almost everybody else and the rest of these stalwarts of family policy, you didn't hear this at all. They lied and lied to you. And now all of a sudden, when the one guy who's actually delivered on something, we can all argue it wasn't enough, but delivered on something, now suddenly everybody's conscience has kicked in. So I don't know. I don't know. We've never seen a political coalition like what's trying to emerge right now with the populist left and the populist right. Never seen anything like this in modern American politics. I don't know what it will lead to. Like I said at the top of the show, there's as much of a chance it'll be transcendent as we will. By next week will be like, remember when Robert Kennedy was a thing, they just memory hold him entirely? We don't know. I don't know. The only thing I know is over there, they have made it very, very clear they mean to end my way of life. I'm confident in that. And they see him, for all of his systemic flaws, they see him as an instrument standing in their way and have treated him thusly. So every time I do this math, I don't know what to do with, I voted for fake pro-life Republicans for years because they gave me a talking point that made me feel sanctimoniously superior, but delivered on nothing. But now that the guy who actually delivered on things won't give me the talking points I want, I'm not going to vote for him. I don't know what to do with that. I can work that math formula both ways, man. I don't know. I really don't know. What I do know is over here, they want to end my way of life. And yours. I know that. And since they see him as the primary instrument in their way, they have done things to him we have never seen them attempt to do to any of us. Why didn't they do this stuff to John McCain? Why didn't they do this stuff to Mitt Romney? George W. Bush got Cindy Sheehan. Remember her? Went around the country every day, going on and on about the Iraq War. By the way, she probably turned out to be right now in hindsight if we're all being correct, being honest about that. Have you ever seen anything like what the last few years have been? Just the mere threat, even with such a confounding, morally confused, craven person who some days is like the Republican Nero and other days like the Republican Darius. Just the thought that he might represent a base of people that might refuse them. Look at the way they've behaved. This party that this guy thinks hasn't existed since like 1989. What timeline's he a part of? What world? And I think a lot of this is we just don't want to admit we've been had all these years. And if I didn't know better, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. Might as well just burn the boats while I'm at it. If I didn't know better, I think some of these pro-life leaders are really upset that Trump is going to prove he can win without them so that their grift is up. No reason to send them no reason for grandmothers, all these pro-life grandmothers all over the country to send them their last $25 out of their Social Security checks again to save the babies. You're not needed. The first time he ran, Trump exposed them. Now he is exposing us. There are a lot of lies we have preferred to believe these last few years. This is like the Dark Knight Rises. Some of you will think Trump is Bane. Some of you will think Trump is Batman. But regardless, ultimately the truth came out. Regardless of which character you think in that story, the truth really came out of what really happened.
Yeah.
With Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent. There was a reckoning, right? And that's what's happening here. We have believed a lot of lies and told each other a lot of lies on the right for a long time, and I made a lot of enemies calling them out. I think a lot of people are having a hard time reconciling with the fact that they're not as important as they maybe thought they were this entire time. That they didn't belong to the party of the Westminster Confession that they thought they did this entire time. How you can be like, I voted for McCain and Romney, but I can't vote for Trump again. I have no idea how you do that math. I just don't know at all. I mean, that makes no sense to me. I can completely understand being confounded morally by how Trump is messaging what the Bible says is a preeminent issue. I mean, I'm the guy that produced a movie about what happens when a culture institutionalizes child sacrifice. But it's complicated here by the fact the guy has a record. He's known to lie to his own benefit. I don't know. Here's what I do know. Over there, they'll kill as many people as they can and have us fighting and dying in as many needless wars as they possibly can. And choking us out with as much coercive force and power of government as they possibly can. I know that. All right, we're going to come back in a moment. Todd and Aaron, I want to get you guys' thoughts now that I kind of just opened a spleen. A reminder, our friends at Jace are doing an exclusive giveaway here in the month of August, a Jace case for life. That's right, a Jace case every year. For the rest of your life, you can win that for free. No obligation cost whatsoever, no purchase necessary whatsoever to enter that contest at jace.com/dace, Jase. Jace.com/dace is where you can go to enter this contest. It expires August 31, so get your entry in now at jace.com/dace. And that's also where you can still go to get your Jace case, to get a backup of some of the best medications humanity's ever discovered, who you never know could be the next ones to win Nobel Prizes and then be called horse-paced and dangerous right when you need them the most. All right. And you can also expand your Jace case to customizable options for the medications that you're looking for as well. Even practical things. I mean, you don't even have to necessarily be suspicious of the government apparatus. You should be. But you could just be like, man, I've got allergies, EpiPens, are we short supply? Add that to your Jace case, customize it to make sure you've always got a backup one of those as well. All right. You can get a discount on your order with the promo code DACE at checkout when you go to jace.com/dace, Jase, jace.com/dace. At checkout for your order, use DACE as your promo code for the discount at jace.com/dace. All right. When we come back, Todd and Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you guys now. And, we'll continue this, I think, very important conversation in a moment. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're about to make perhaps the biggest financial decision you'll make in your life, which for a lot of Americans, it's either buying or selling a home, or in many cases also both. You're trying to do them both at the same time. What it would mean to not necessarily have trustworthy help, reliable assistance, and then trying to do that, imagine it further, trying to do it in this environment right now, where when you look at the combination of soaring home values, interest rates, and then the lack of discretionary income at the same time, perhaps the most challenging home ownership real estate market in American history is right now. I mean, that is the equivalent of riding a barbed wire fence, financially anyway, of riding a barbed wire fence, straddling it, buck naked. Don't do that. All right, get a real estate agent that you can trust to help guide your way through this process. And where can you find them? The name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com is where you can go. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. And there we're going to give you an agent. We'll recommend somebody that we have vetted and verified. Otherwise, we wouldn't list them there in our database. And a lot of times they're going to come from right here in the same audience with the Blaze as you. So you have values in common as well. So whether you're going across the country or across town in these unprecedented times,
bing, 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 bing,
make sure you first go in with an agent you can trust at realestateagentsitrust.com. All right. So Trump and the life issue and pro-life leaders, and what do we do with an issue that the scriptures are very clear has preeminence in God's economy? All right. I kind of just emptied my spleen on this, but let me step aside now, gentlemen. Todd and Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Well, listen, I am more pro-life than ever before. And before I go on that, let me just say that on Steve's behalf, he would never ask me to say this, but short of him actually being saved, if there's an issue that drives him mind, body, and soul, it's the fact that he said it many times, he was born to a 15-year-old mom who chose not to kill him. So if you're going to try to come at him, but he's a hypocrite on this issue, I'm saying this for me, screw you. All right? Absolute nonsense. Secondly, his messaging there at the end, which is why I'm more prideful than ever before, when Steve said, they're trying to kill you, that's why we're more pro-life than any before. That is literally true. Steve and I have a different meaning. When he says they're trying to destroy our way of life, part of me, if you listen to the show on a daily basis, I'm trying to destroy our way of life too, because I think our way of life got us here. But I'm not trying to kill you in the process.
That's his new nickname, Todd, the Destroyer, the Ender of Worlds.
Our comfort, our sloth, it's got us here. I think we need to destroy it. Otherwise, we're wasting each other's time. But his messaging there at the end, they are trying to kill you. They're not just trying to kill babies. They're trying to kill your sons by sending them to wars that they don't even believe in. They're trying to kill you by poisoning you with a jab. They're trying to kill you by opening up the border and letting murders in and emptying out the prisons. They are literally trying to kill you. So that's what we are all weighing here from a pro-life perspective. Back when Steve is talking about the people who gladly compromised with the likes of McCain and Romney. They weren't openly trying to kill us in a way back then. And still, when that issue was just right there, just pro-life and not all of this other stuff, they were glad to sell out on it. Now they're trying to, I didn't even mention transgenderism. Yes, if they're transgendering your kids or trying to take away from them, that's basically murder too. Now all of this is on the table. Pro-life is a bigger issue than it's ever been before. And it got to this way once again because everybody sold out before when it was just the one issue, and it should have been everybody targeting it on that. And now we've given them the high ground, the lowest of low demonic ground. We gave it to them. So you and all your narcissism and thinking you're going to come out clean on this river of bleep on the other side, look around you. They plan on killing your children in any number of ways. I mean that literally. It makes them happy. They have abortion taco trucks outside the DNC, okay? This whole thing, if you guys, Steve has been famous for talking about talking points from the 1980s, man. You guys have dialed that up to 11. Look at the world we're living in. We live between Canada and Mexico and the Atlantic and the Pacific. This ain't America anymore, and it hasn't been a long time.
As it pertains to the dynamic between Donald Trump and pro-life organizations, institutions, my entire life, it's been all carrot, no stick, okay, when it comes to pro-life. Got to vote GOP to appoint better judges. Okay, we have a GOP president. We need to expand the majority in the Senate. Okay, we expanded the majority in the Senate. Can't do that for reasons, fill in the blank. We got John Roberts, was he in the majority opinion on Dobbs? Or did
yes,
he? Yeah, he was. So we got that.
He did not. He wrote a separate majority. He didn't want it flat out overturned, but he did rule in favor of Dobbs. Yes.
Yeah, but for most of, he's the guy who saved Obamacare. We have a laundry list. Donald Trump was the guy who overtly specifically promised to appoint the judges to overturn Roe. Neil Gorsuch, we just did an overtime on him last week. The pitfalls of capital L libertarianism. When he's really right, he's really right. When he's really wrong, he's really wrong. Amy Coney Barrett, other than like one or two decisions, absolute backstabber. And Brett Kavanaugh, well, there's a reason why his last name is basically an adjective. You really Kavanaugh. I mean,
It is. You're right about that.
but it's always been carrot and no stick. Or in Joker terms, it's the dog chasing the proverbial car. And finally, back in 2022 now, has it been? The dog caught the car. And all these pro-life organizations vote GOP to appoint better justices, that we might overturn Roe v. Wade someday. They were caught flat-footed. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't really to overturn Roe v. Wade. It was vote GOP so that we continue to get our seat at the table. We continue to get our seat at the table. That's really what it was. Dead baby body parts back in 2015 with David Daleiden in the Center for Medical Progress. What did all these pro-life organizations with their, I guess, great clout do to punish some of the, I mean, I think it was back in 2015, I don't think did GOP have control of the Senate back then? I can't remember. But what was made out of that? Where was the great punishments for not actually capitalizing on that? Nowhere to be found, but we still have to vote GOP to appoint better justices. Finally, we tripped and fell into actually getting justices on the Supreme Court who were willing to overturn Roe v. Wade. And now we're caught flat-footed. We were exposed. I want you to listen to something very, very clearly. Again, this is not making excuses for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the just immoral stance that they are taking on the issue of baby murder. Essentially, what Donald Trump, though, is saying to those people, you are not really a coalition. You're not really a coalition. They're just seeing a reflection of each other because functionally the pro-life movement, whatever it has been, for my entire life, has really been what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are articulating, functionally. Functionally. And now finally, when we got something concrete done in the overturning of Roe v. Wade, they are exposed as being functionally pro-choice. And so now Donald Trump looks at these leaders and says, you're actually redundancy. What are you doing? You're actually at just is that good in business, redundancies? Maybe for liability, but in terms of growing, not really. So if you are one of the people who have been taking, you mentioned all the shows you've done in yesteryear, asking these pro-life leaders, what have you actually accomplished? What have you actually done? If you're a voter who has bought those pro-life organizations' messages that, we're actually doing something here, and you see the exposing of those people as really just being functionally pro-choice, at the end of the day, we had our pants pulled down. The overturning of Roe, is that a righteous thing? Absolutely. But all of us who have been taking the pro-life position, the anti-abortion position, all of these years, we all got caught with our pants down. And now political leaders, it's not moral, but they see us as a liability instead of a strength. So Thomas Sowell, I don't know if you guys saw this. He wrote, He wrote an op-ed.
Great piece.
In the Wall Street Journal.
Yep.
And he just said, Republicans, you're about to blow it. You're about to blow it, and you deserve it if it happens. This is Exhibit A in my mind. This is Exhibit A. So yes, it is absolutely true. In my mind, it's absolutely true that Donald Trump and has maybe reason to see pro-life as a liability. Well, it's actually should still be his strength. But it is a chaotic situation here, the dynamic at play, when really it shouldn't be, as Todd articulated when Bob was on. It really shouldn't be. You really should just be able to make this easy and say, they just want to kill kids. They just want to kill babies. Why are we pondering the lint in our navel over this? We've made one of the most simple issues into chaos. And really, at the end of the day, we don't have anybody else to blame than ourselves.
There's another factor I think that needs to be mentioned about the RFK endorsement that it's not just as simple, by the way. Voters are people, not algorithms. So it's not just as simple as, well, this poll showed that RFK was taking 59% of his voters from Trump and 41 from the Democrats. So just take his 5 to 7% in the polls, 59% of that and added. It's not that simple. Number one, we don't have a national presidential election. We have 50 state elections. There's really only a handful of states, 7 at the most, that are going to matter. Okay. So the numbers, it certainly don't hurt. They certainly do not hurt Trump, obviously, but how much it really helps is really subjective and hard to tell. Here's where I think the RFK Jr. endorsement helps Trump the most. And this is directly in response to why I was so upset about leaving these potential pro-life female voters on the sidelines, because it's the kind of mistake you make that plays into their narrative to justify the same shenanigans that we saw in 2020. All right? One of the ways that they would do this, one of the key narrative aspects would be, by golly, just so razor close. And then look at that RFK Jr. out there doing you all like Ralph Nader did Al Gore in 2000, man. That was the difference. I mean, if Ralph Nader is not on the ballot in Florida in 2000, Al Gore wins and wins the presidency. We're not even counting Chads. Chad's just a name. It's not even a verb or an adjective. Nothing's hanging. All right. Al Gore wins, and what goes around comes around, and now you guys' turn to drink the bitter, swallow the bitter pill of the spoiler candidate who took just enough of your vote. Right. That's what they would have done. This takes that off of the table. That they are not going to be able to use him now. And I think that's the biggest boost that he provides, is that would have been a key subplot of the narrative trademark. Remember, we had the science trademark. I'm now going with the narrative trademark. That's a key subplot to the narrative trademark that is now off the table. And he's off the table before early voting starts. Before we're just now coming out of conventions, ballots are just getting printed. So he's off the table. They can't use that as a built-in excuse now for why they didn't win a whole bunch of bellwether counties again, and then just so happened to overperform in the handful of industrial or urban counties in the battleground states that they control. That excuse now is gone. Thoughts? And I think there's definite value in that.
I think you're right. I think there's definite value. I think it's ultimately an asterisk on the larger discussion that we've had thus far. So and because of how the news cycle works, it's one that they plan on lying about and blasting past as soon as possible to compensate for.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to gauge with any precision. So, yeah, the narrative benefit is probably the biggest boon, but it's impossible to gauge with any precision exactly how much this helps Donald Trump, because here you've got at least three layers of drilling down that you have to do. This is just my gut. Okay, I'm not basing this necessarily on data. My gut says maybe 60% of RFK Jr.'s support came from the right. A quarter of that 60% is probably never going to vote for Trump. So the remaining 3/4 of that 60% of RFK Jr.'s support might be persuaded to vote for Trump after this. But then the further level that you have to dig down is where are those supporters coming from? If it's in places like Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, that's a good thing. If it's been places that Trump's not going to lose regardless, I don't know so it's impossible to gauge with any precision how much this is a benefit, at least in terms of raw numbers.
I'm not sure we came to any determinations today we didn't already have or weren't already wrestling with. Do you guys think that at the very least this was even a productive conversation to have on some level?
This conversation, or the question that I asked Todd when he first came in this morning, which was, did you catch McNeese versus Tarleton State the other day? Probably more valuable than that.
I think it's been absolutely productive because it's honest. Clarity, there's no guarantee of anything. The DNC actually had an abortion taco truck out there. In reaction to that, Trump messages the way he does, and then so this all happened within 48 hours, and then he's rescued from that mistake, at least in part, at least for a news cycle, by a Kennedy. Again, how do you do that math?
And then another part of this math that's different. I was thinking about this the other day. That's different than it was in 2020. In 2016, Donald Trump leveraged social media, the era of social media, in ways hitherto unknown by Republican candidates. And I think that undoubtedly probably helped him in that election. In 2020, what did we see, though? That was taken pretty much off the table. You look at the Hunter Biden story, the social media censorship was crazy. Now it's in 2024, it's not so crazy anymore because you have X. There's just so many factors drilling down into this. It is absolute, in terms of raw data and trying to make projections, it's just chaos.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Romans 8:28.